In today's lecture, we are going to talk about Gabriel Marcel, a French existentialist philosopher born in 1889 and died in 1973. Gabriel Marcel was born in Paris of a Jewish mother, but his father was a Catholic. But he was basically brought up by a stepmother who was a Protestant. So you can see that in his own life, he had experienced different religious backgrounds, and probably this also has shaped his philosophical thinking. When he was 40, he converted to Catholicism again. He embraced the religion of his father. He had his graduation from the University of Paris, Sorbonne, and he was also greatly gifted with some talents in music, talents in dramatics. So he is a man with a lot of aesthetic gifts. He developed an existential thought that can be stated aloud in the following phrase: there is only one suffering, to be alone. I repeat that. There is only one suffering, to be alone. He said this in the very country when Sartre was trying to understand the human being from a different perspective, where we have discussed Sartre. Hell is the other people. Of course, we understood Sartre also meant something very different in that context, though it is often misunderstood. Gabriel Marcel's philosophy is scattered through the various articles, books, plays, and certain novels. Certain experiences of his life definitely contributed to his existentialist thinking. Some of them I would like to enumerate now. The first experience that shaped his thinking is the difference of temperament. The difference of temperament made him realize that some of the incompatibilities of life cannot be reconciled by intellectual formulas. There are certain temperaments which are very different, and they are not compatible with the life in general, and we cannot reconcile by any intellectual pursuit. The second, the spiritual aridity at home set him forth for a spiritual quest that culminated his faith in God. There was a spiritual aridity in his life, not because his family did not have a religion. As I told you, they had different religions, but precisely because of that, he realized there is a vacuum, spiritually speaking. These religions were, they were practicing their own doctrines, their own dogmas, their own even ritual practices, but less of spiritual depth he could experience, and therefore he had to find his own spiritual way, and then finally that he thinks has culminated in his faith in God. The third experience which was very profound for him is the presence of his own mother. Even after her death, he somehow felt that she was constantly present with him, and that made him to reflect on what it means to be present. So normally when we think of presence, it is always in terms of the physical presence. Now Gabriel Marcel thinks of presence very differently. Somebody can be physically not being present to you, but they can be really present. The fourth experience is his experience at the war field. And this took him away from abstract dialectics to anxious meditations on life and being. So when you confront something very cruel like war situation, you are not sitting and reflecting something speculatively like an armchair philosopher would do, but rather you are trying to meditate seriously on what it means to be, what is life. And therefore he was not satisfied with the academic life of his times, which according to him has been stifling all creativity, because academic life has always been going in terms of certain methods, certain approach, and therefore certain intellectual formulas which really do not necessarily reflect the life experiences that we have. and in fact it stifles all creativity of expression of what one's experience about life is. This is the reason why he began his own philosophical reflection. There are at least 4 of his works which are worth noting. The first one is the Metaphysical Journal, published in 1927, and the second one is Being and Having, published in 1935, Homo Viator, published in 1945, and The Mystery of Being, published in 1951. If any of you want to do some kind of book review on this, I would recommend that either you do on Being and Having or on The Mystery of Being. I mean, both of them are very profound and they are very relevant for our contemporary times as well. Let me now briefly try to explain some of his general ideas. Gabriel Marcel had a twofold approach to reality. He makes a distinction between the primary and the secondary reflection. The primary reflection is generally analytic and it is dissective. You try to analyze it, dissect it, and try to understand it. And this is what exactly happens in a scientific research. Any scientific approach goes by certain analysis, certain dissection. The reflecting subject here is an impersonal anyone. So your person's subjective personality doesn't really matter. But the secondary reflection, on the other hand, is synthetic and recuperative. Now, this has, according to him, a greater role to play in philosophy, because philosophy should somehow bring us to a certain synthesis. It also should help us to bring a certain dimension that can be recuperative, not dissective. Another corresponding distinction that he makes is between problem and mystery. I think this distinction is very valid and I find it very fascinating personally. Now, what is a problem? A problem is something that is, a scientific pursuit of trying to offer a solution. So therefore, problems are open to solutions. When you speak about a scientific problem, you are trying to fix the problem. Whether it is in astronomy, whether it is in mathematics, there is something that is not quite right, it is problematic, so you try to come with another hypothesis to resolve the problem. A problem always seeks for a solution, and it's fine. I mean, that's the very nature of the problem itself, and that is how scientific knowledge progresses. Philosophical reflection does not deal with problems, because philosophical reflection are not meant to give solutions. Solutions in the general understanding of the term, like we would normally look very quickly in our life. Philosophical reflection deals with what he calls mystery. Now, it is not something mysterious in that sense, something that you find it very fishy, something that is not, there is nothing clear about it. It doesn't mean in that sense. Now, what is a mystery? A mystery is a question in which the being of the questioner is involved. Whereas in the problem, I am outside of the problem. So I can look at the problem, I can analyze that, I can dissect it, and then I can try and come up with a solution. Whereas in the mystery, you are involved in that very issue which you are contemplating, the very issue you are reflecting. Now let us take the example from mathematics for a problem, or from science for a problem. So, the science would say, well, it's very difficult now to think about certainty because of Heisenberg's uncertainty. Now, how are we going to explain this uncertainty principle? Now, that would be a problem. Now, they would take a step back and look at the particles in physics, particularly at the quantum level, and then try to understand, explain, and give a solution as to explain this uncertainty principle. Because you are not part of it, in some sense, at least. A mystery would be, for example, you break with your girlfriend or a boyfriend. Now, you really don't have a solution to look at, to look for. It doesn't mean that you cannot reconcile with your girlfriend or a boyfriend, but then the whole point is, this reflection is very different from a scientific way of analyzing and understanding and so on and so forth. The reason is very simple, because you are part of that experience. You are part and parcel of that issue. So when the being of the questioner is involved in that, when you are into it, it becomes a mystery. Therefore, a problem can be solved, but a mystery cannot be solved. It doesn't mean you cannot look for a better way of making relationship. It doesn't mean that, but it only means that you will not be able to try and analyze it in every detail. The more you try to analyze, probably you will create more problems. And that's what happens in human relationship. Certain things are best ignored, they're best overlooked. It's like sometimes one of my colleagues told me, when we were sharing our own difficulties with interacting with students and so on, somebody said, I never get to understand my students, because what is in their mind is not very clear to me. Then another colleague of mine said, well, don't try to understand them, just love them. I mean, I'm just simplifying the idea. Because when you are dealing with humans in an involved manner, it is not by analyzing, it's not by trying to dissecting every aspect of it. It can be sometimes very pretentious if we do that. I mean, human beings are mystery. I think we need to learn to accept it, and then learn to accept it even joyfully, because that is the depth of human life itself, and that is why human relationship can be very profound. There are things that you cannot just merely express. There are emotions that are so deep that hardly you can find words to express, especially when it comes of human relationship. And therefore, for the problems, I am only an epistemological subject. In other words, I am only a subject in terms of my mind trying to think about it in a cold, distant manner, because I wouldn't be involved in that. And therefore, I try to grapple with the problem or the object. Now, in the mystery is a question in which I am not merely an epistemological subject, but the whole of my person is involved. And therefore, no solution is possible, or no solution can be aimed at in a mystery. Solution in terms of the problem solving method, in that sense. So this is a very important distinction that he makes when we deal with human persons. So the relationship that we have with humans is very important, very significant, and all the events that happen around this relationship is to be seen in terms of a certain awe and wonder, as a mystery rather than a problem that we can fix, as a problem that can be solved. Another important distinction that Gabriel Marcel makes is being and having. Of course, that is the title of one of his works as well. Now, again, he relates this being and having to mystery and problem. Mystery deals with being. So when we deal with a person, the being of the person, then that is where the mystery dimension comes in. It's not something very calculative. Whereas when we deal with the having of a person, then obviously it is a problem. So you will run into problem with a businessman or with your business partner, because it is all about certain calculations and negotiations and certain differences that you would like to make sure doesn't affect you or the business partner, for example. So that would be basically from the point of your having, whether I have as much as you have, so whether you have as much as I have, at least there is a certain sense of fairness in the having part of it. So hardly anything to do with our being in that sense. Well, it can be remotely related, but it's not directly related. At least I am not looking at that person from that relationship point of view, which enables me to have a mystery dimension of the person. And these are very clear black and white kind of approach in terms of problems. So problem is related to the question of having. So in having, the relation between the one who has and what is possessed, therefore the who and the what, is external for the most part. So most of the time, the having is not applicable to human persons, because you don't really possess human beings. Most of the time it is about the material objects. So the having dimension has to be seen in terms of the material objects, not with regard to the human persons in any case. The bond is not in any case internal, whereas in being, the relationship is very internal. The relationship is between two persons, I and thou. Now, Gabriel Marcel is someone who has very much strongly affirmative of this idea of I and thou relationship, a certain sense of reciprocity between the I and the thou. Life is all about trying not to understand one another, but trying to accommodate one another. We will probably may not be able to understand anyone, let alone oneself, in one's lifetime. I have not understood myself fully yet, and I don't think I will ever understand myself anytime fully. And if I cannot understand myself fully, then obviously we will not be able to understand anybody else fully. We would try to have some glimpse of what they are to some extent, but there is always a mystery dimension. The other always eludes all the way of comprehension that we are capable of making of the other. I think that is very noble about this human nature itself. So it is not something that we need to be worried, something that we need to be concerned about, as if something is wrong. No, that's very common. One of the things I always tell to my friends who get married and so on, do not try to understand each other, but try to accept each other. I mean, that's the most challenging thing. You need to just accept. You may not be able to understand why the person is responding to a situation very differently, unexpectedly. Well, you don't know. Just accept it. That's how that person is. It needs quite a lot of courage in that sense. And this way of this being approach of emphasizing on the person as a mystery needs a certain amount of courage. I think, and it's not difficult to do that. It only needs to be, lived in a certain way. My relation to having is such that what I have is at my disposal. So my objects are something that I can use. Precisely, objects are meant for that. But people are not to be used. People are to be loved. Unfortunately, in a society like ours today, it happens the other way. Sometimes we tend to love what we possess, the objects, and then use people. Very sad. I can give you any number of examples. Look at our own lives, the way we lead it. Everyday experience of ours will tell you that. So it's very, Gabriel Marcel is trying to remind us of this, a singular point, which is very inspirational. Objects are meant to be used because they are at your disposal, because you have them, you are possessing them. Whereas beings, you don't possess, particularly the human beings. And therefore you cannot just use them, you have to love them, really speaking. So the whole difficulty is there is a constant tension between this being and having. So some of us can be very having-centered persons. So you can think of, as if you are owning others. A typical mindset that we had in the feudal society, and sometimes it continues to exist even in the contemporary times. A feudal mindset, in India it's very common. You think if somebody works for you as if you own that person. You don't really. You don't own anybody. You don't have anybody. So that is some these persons are at disposal. One of the difficulties I always have, which I keep asking myself, is the way the corporate societies function today. Though we do say a lot of employment, all these things are fine. I'm not contesting every aspect of these corporate companies and the foreign companies investing in India and so on. Fine. But when you look at deeply, it's always the use and throw policy. They just fire and hire. So when they need, they would hire you, and then when they don't need you, they can just fire you. So I came to know, I mean, with my just limited contacts around Pune, many people young people have lost jobs, just all on a sudden. Not their fault, and it's not that they are not doing their work, but because of this COVID-19 and coronavirus. Well, I do see there is economic problem and so on. I'm not denying that factor. But somehow the attitude seems to be very dominant, is that we can use people when we need and just throw them when we don't need it. So this can also happen in human relationships sometimes, not just in the corporate companies, but even individual life, and that would be very, very unfortunate if a certain mindset of ours is exhibited that way, that we treat people as objects like use and throw. In different ways, when we need something, then we try to befriend them. When our project is over, when our work is over, we just ignore them. Or even it can happen even in romantic relationships sometimes, unfortunately, and it's very sad. So therefore, there is a certain sense of right perspective has to be kept with regard to human person and the human relationship, according to Gabriel Marcel. When it comes to relating to human person, we should be being-centered persons and not having-centered persons. And it is even more important for us to realize that every person is a mystery, and every person surpasses a certain judgment that I can make on that person. I'm not saying therefore no judgment is possible, yes, but then always with a certain awareness that my judgment on the other person can be very limited, and that person is much more than the judgment that I make. One of the things I always tell this to my students, and I can tell you as well, we are all in a system, we can't help it. So sometimes students tend to associate their marks with themselves. No, your marks are not yourself. You are much more than what your marks are. Marks are merely indicative of just how you did in a particular task. I mean, there could be various reasons why that particular task that you didn't turn out to be the way you wanted it to be. So therefore, it has nothing to do with you as a person. Yeah. So very often there is a certain way in which people tend to associate what they have or what they have obtained with themselves. You are much more than what these numbers are. These are mere numbers, and there are various factors, including a certain subjective perception of the evaluator. So we cannot avoid that as well. However, you cannot be partial to somebody, but 100% objectivity is almost impossible in anything. So you should be also so even if you get less marks, it doesn't mean that you are not worth. I mean, I'm saying this precisely because there is a lot of stress among the students today, and I know there are students who just they are very vulnerable and then even commit suicide if they don't get whatever marks they were expecting. No, your life is much more than these numbers, or for that matter, whatever career you do, that is just your career, that's not you. In India in particular, our career and everything is associated with our worth, and that's a bit of danger. If somebody is doing a white collar job, as though he is of a higher person than somebody who has a blue collar job. No, everybody is a person in having his or her own worth, and that particular way of looking at human person is very significant, because it is not the work that you do, kind of manifest who you are, but what you are in relation to others. Your very life. That is what is that manifests about your very person. So I'm just saying this kind of ideas because in today's world, oftentimes, particularly because of a certain consumeristic tendency, it's all about who has the best mobile phone, who has the best laptop, no, it has nothing to do with what you are. You may have the best of laptop, that doesn't add any worth to you as you. It adds worth to what you have as, but not what you are. So I have noticed this very often. There is a certain probably you guys may not be feeling that way, it may not be applicable to you, but I do know there are some students who carry a tremendous sense of unworthiness, which is not called for, honestly, no. So I want to underline this, and I think Gabriel Marcel is very significant in this context. And I think the society keeps reiterating, and of course our parents for the most part as well, they keep insisting you have to get the first mark. I always wonder, every parent wants their child to get the first mark. How on earth is it possible? The very grading system for me is very painful, you know. I think we seem to be pitching one against the other. So every individual is gifted in his or her own way. I don't think any two persons are comparable. You cannot, and you should not. You know, you are worthy in your own way. I am worthy in my own way. So I don't think any comparison between any two of us is warranted here. But then our society's nature is that, you know, our parents keep telling us, look at the neighbor's boy, how much he is scoring. Why you are not scoring? Well, but the neighbor's boy doesn't do what you are doing. You may be achieving in many other things, but it's not about just achieving. You are what you are, and there is much to you than just what you achieve, whether in terms of marks, whether in terms of awards, whether in terms of recognition. This kind of can disable people very badly. I'm just making this aware to you. I'm sure you have come across some of these things, if not in your own life, but with people whom you know and so on. So I think we need to have a right perspective. And the humans we should have the right priority, and then there should be a healthy balance between the being and having. I'm not saying we shouldn't be having anything at all. No, that's not my point. But you don't equate your having with your being. So these are two different things. So I think that perspective is very important. I think Gabriel Marcel is very significant in this matter. Now, another important aspect, Gabriel Marcel, I'm just reading the chat box, which I'll come back to that. Yeah, another important aspect which Gabriel Marcel speaks about is body. Again, I find it very significant in today's context when body is seen in a very negative way. When I say it is seen in a negative way, I don't mean saying that, you know, body is despised and so on. Okay, there was a time when people had this idea body is a material thing, corruptible, and therefore it has been despised. We may not be having the same kind of a negative attitude towards body, despising the body, but the way we look at body is very much today in terms of a carnal, merely a carnal aspect, forgetting that this body is not merely a flesh. I think there is to be a healthy distinction to be maintained between flesh and body. Flesh is something that, again, you know, you use for whatever amusement that you may like to have. Body is much more. So I think this, again, in the context of being and having, Gabriel Marcel gives two instances of having. One is when I say I have a body. I use the word have, but that doesn't mean that is external to me. It's very strange. Well, I also say it is my body. On the one hand, it looks as if it is I'm possessing something, as if I am saying it is my book. Again, that way of looking at having a body is very different than what you would say having a secret. A secret is something like, for example, it's typically a pure type of having. When I say I have a secret, the secret is not me. It has nothing. It doesn't have any bearing on my being in certain sense, because it is fully under my control and also at my disposal. But body is a special kind of having. So when I say, use the possessive pronoun, my body, or his body, or her body, it may give an impression body is something that I possess. In other words, I have something at my disposal. What I possess, I can dispose of. I got certain gadgets, I can dispose them of tomorrow. So that is what I do with my possession. What I have is at my disposal, and I can dispose of it without ceasing to be. So tomorrow if I give up my mobile, I am not ceasing to be. I am continuing to be. I'm continuing to be what I am, and I will be continuing to be. But in the case of body, I cannot dispose of my body. The moment I dispose of my body, I cease to exist. Now, in the modern times, people would say, well, we could download our brain and then upload it, into a system, and then that the consciousness may continue to exist, and I may not need a body, and so on. Again, I think that is an extreme way of looking at human life, a very scientific way of looking at human life, and I don't think that such kind of human life can be really human life in that sense. I think the bodily dimension is very important for us to be human, and that's one of the things that we cannot ignore. So its body is not something that I possess. So therefore I do not have my body in the strict sense of the term. So, okay. Rather, my body is the condition for all that I can possess or all that I can give away. It is a body that enables me either to have something or to dispose of something. Either I possess something or I give away something. So that is a condition. It is not one of the things that I possess. It's a prototype in that sense. So nor can I say my body is something that I am. So my body is not exactly me as well. So yes, it is me, but I am much more than my body as well. For example, tomorrow I may be injured and I may lose one arm, but I am still myself. That doesn't change what I am, who I am. So in that sense, the relationship between body and oneself is very ambivalent one. So it's an ambivalent position of being and having. So in one sense, I am my body. In another sense, I am really not fully my body. In a certain sense, I have my body in that sense. So it is neither being nor having. But I can only be in my bodily dimension. In other words, he would say, I am bodily. I cannot say I am my body, but I am bodily. Because my existence is a bodily existence. I am an incarnate existence. We are not mere spirits hovering in the air. No, we are not. So, that is the reason when I am hungry, well, I say I am hungry, but it is my body which is hungry, isn't it? But still I say I am hungry. That is because I am bodily. If I am not bodily, if I am just pure spirit hovering in the air, there is no way I can be hungry or thirsty. Or I may not have mass. So when I speak about I weigh 70 kg, obviously I am referring to the mass of my body. But I don't say my body weighs this much, I weigh. Right? So, therefore body is not really exterior to me, just as my own spirit or soul, whatever you may call that, is not exterior to me. So, in a certain sense, I am not body, but I am bodily. Therefore, the human person has to be understood primarily as incarnate beings. Human being has to be understood in the bodily dimension. Now, this is very important, particularly in a context when people somehow tend to think that what matters in life is all kind of spiritual attainment, wisdom and so on. Yes, they are important. I am not discrediting that, but you cannot just exclusively focus on that without focusing on your bodily needs. These are fundamental needs as well. Your hunger, your thirst. So when we relate to human person, it is also important. While the person is mystery, the person is bodily. And for this, the mystery of the person has obviously certain bodily needs as well. Bodily needs which are primarily related to survival, like hunger, thirst, shelter, all those things. This approach of human person is very important. One of the things I probably think, I'm not sure whether I'm right in my approach. In the West, for a long time, Christianity had been influenced by Plato's Greek philosophy. It's not really the original Christian teaching, which has a Jewish root. The Jewish root does not make a distinction between body and soul, that dichotomy what Plato did make, and Descartes made it later. But they are influenced by a certain Greek tradition, and that Greek tradition entered certain Christian Western tradition. So when you speak about the West, the Western culture, obviously the Christian thinking is there. And there used to be a time when all these bodily needs are not important. What is important is the need of the soul, even to the extent of despising the body. Of course, now things have changed. But I think also it is very true in the Indian tradition. I sometimes think, I may be wrong, correct me, partly why we are not sympathetic towards people who die of starvation, people who have nothing to eat a full meal, is because our understanding of human person. Because we think the body is something external to me. Today I'm in this body, tomorrow I may be in another body. And then that, depending on what body I have, is based on my karma. So what I am really is my Atman, my soul, whatever the English translation you may like to give, my spirit. There may be some wonderful spiritual way of thinking about it. I have no difficulty with that. But then, to the neglect of bodily needs, if it is over exaggerated, then obviously none of the human problems will affect us. That could also explain why body is oftentimes abused in our country. The amount of sexual assault. I'm only guessing. I don't have any proof. But I think that because after all, body is not you. So it doesn't violate your dignity. A certain implicit, nobody says it explicitly, probably this is playing into our minds very, very deeply. And therefore, it's a way of implicitly justifying, and such kind of mindset is oftentimes exhibited in public. Very strange, very sad, and we have to grapple with this reality. And therefore, body is not something external. I am bodily, and then when my bodily rights are violated, my rights are violated, because I'm not apart from my body as far as my existence is concerned. I think Gabriel Marcel is awakening us to a right perspective of looking at the human existence. To that extent, I think we need to appropriate some of his ideas in today's context. Okay, another important topic that he discusses, like any existentialist would discuss, is the question of freedom. Now remember, Sartre has read Gabriel Marcel well, and that is one of the reasons, because though Sartre is an atheist while Gabriel Marcel is a committed theist, Sartre could come to terms with the fact that one can be a believer and can still be an existentialist because of people like Gabriel Marcel who were believers and yet could be very deeply existentialist thinkers, having very profound insights and ideas. So Marcel considers freedom not as a condemnation, not so much as a burden that you have to shoulder. So Sartre would even crudely say you are condemned to be free. I mean, that is a way of insisting. I mean, when he speaks about the burden, again it is to highlight the responsibility that you have. Gabriel Marcel would say freedom is the grace, it's a state of grace. It is an invitation for you offered to be free. So the free act is very creative of the personal subject. So you creatively appropriate the freedom. At the same time, you create yourself in and through freedom. So freedom is a necessary condition for creating oneself. In the absence of freedom, you cannot create oneself. Again, this is one point that I time and again insist with my students. I would rather give you freedom rather than keep coming after you, only because in freedom you can grow. You can create yourself only in freedom. You will make mistakes, sure, no doubt about it. You may abuse the freedom initially for a while, but I cannot be all the time protecting you, and that's not my work either. whether it is an exam. I mean, I would consider this whole idea of invigilation in exam as an order. Well, not that our students are all very mature, they wouldn't be copying and so on. Human, um, we have our human limitations, I am willing to grant. But then the more you kind of complicate this invigilating process, the more we are disabling them. This is my way of looking at it. Because how do you really grow? You cannot grow unless you have freedom. Unless you have freedom, you cannot create yourself. So therefore, it is in freedom you can really give a creative response to the appeal of your being. So what you are, what you want to be, etc. is possible only in freedom. So freedom for him is not so much as freedom from something, but freedom for something. So freedom is there precisely for you to realize your dreams, to fulfill yourself, for your self-fulfillment, for the projects that will help you to fulfill yourself, to realize the self-fulfillment. And it can be realized only through your freedom or commitment to others. Again, one's freedom is somehow related to your commitment to others. And if you are not free, you cannot be committed to others. And to commitment to others, Gabriel Master would also include commitment to God. So, I mean, he comes from a very Christian worldview where, loving God and loving neighbor is one and the same, according to their belief. So, commitment to others would also imply a certain commitment to God. You will love God only by loving others. You cannot love God just like that. It's impossible. That would be a kind of pretension. So, that kind of strong thinking that Gabriel Marcel reflects again from his background. So the human has a capacity for commitment in freedom or betrayal as well. But freedom is not merely a choice between two alternatives. Freedom is not something to be seen as you have a choice either to be committed or to betray. Rather, freedom, you have to win freedom, as though you have a conquest of freedom, because the free activity is marked by both receptivity and creativity. Now, receptivity, because you have to be open to the freedom that is there, but at the same time you should also be creative by making those possibilities lying within the freedom become actual. So it is not a question of either or kind of distinction he is making, but rather he is saying that there is something given in freedom, but you also need to actualize that freedom. But of course it is a finite freedom, so it is not something infinite. So in a certain sense, that the human is a created being, therefore, so you don't have absolute freedom. There are certain limitations. So you cannot play God in that sense. You cannot pretend to be kind of all, powerful and therefore, completely free. But nevertheless, you are free, and therefore you have to accept this finite freedom and see this is a givenness is there, but then still there is a way in which I can create within that givenness. I mean, this is not anything new for us to understand. Oftentimes people, including myself, we will blame others for what I am, the situation I am in. The society is responsible, yes, to some extent, what I am, but I cannot keep blaming the society as all the time. True, the society impedes my freedom, it can cripple my freedom. So the givenness is there, but then the possibilities are there as well. So I think it's the right spirit of balance that is needed. So a certain way in which the political freedom enables your individual freedom, but the individual freedom can still be lived even within a hostile political environment. It's the consequence may be, very unpleasant, but that's what makes people's life worth in some cases. People, when they fought for their freedom, for their rights, it was not an easy sale. So because there was a political climate which was very disturbing, which was very suppressive, and so on, yet people could somehow confront that and then do something. Social, political, all forms of limitations on freedom is there. Nevertheless, you don't completely resign yourself to some kind of fatalism, and if you do that, that would be a sad thing. You try to create yourself within those limitations and try to do the best of what you can. I mean, that is what most of the experience of the freedom fighters of this country was, and the most of the experience of the human rights activists in this country is, and it probably will be. So, well, I think that is the way in which he looks at freedom. Another important aspect of Gabriel Marcel is the question of intersubjectivity. I think there are two philosophers who have emphasized. One is the Jewish philosopher or Jewish thinker Martin Buber, whom you are familiar with probably. Martin Buber is, was one of those, Holocaust survivors himself. Martin Buber also has theorized this idea of intersubjectivity, and Marcel, and they are almost contemporary times. Perhaps Martin Buber is a little later than Marcel, but more or less the same time. Marcel is known for his theory of intersubjectivity. He developed this theory based on the theory of intentionality in phenomenology. You remember we have discussed intentionality in Husserl's phenomenology, and he applied this intentionality to a new notion called availability. Now that I am available is directed to other persons. For Husserl, my intentionality is consciously directed to the other. Here, my being available is directed to others and other persons, and it can necessarily be only to other persons. The very act through which I am, for him, implies an allusion to other people. I am because you are. So an I to a thou. And this I and the thou together form the we or us. So there is no narrowness of the subject and object relation. A subject and object relation would be I and it, isn't it? In the third person. Whereas here it is a subject to subject relation. I and thou, face to face. And therefore it is intersubjective. My relationship to human person can only be I to thou and never can I to it. So I can never reduce another human person to a third person. If you do that, obviously what you are doing is you are reducing that mystery of the person to a problem, or the being of the person to having. So it's like you're reducing to object. That would be a narrow way of relating. So it is a subject to subject relation. So therefore it is a relation of being and not of having. Marcel refers to such a relation of being in different terms he uses, besides availability, like participation, presence, meeting, encounter, etc. Now remember, I told you one of the things that contributed to his existential thinking is the presence that he experienced of his mother even after his death. So in other words, he was constantly in an intersubjective relation with his mother. So his mother is not somebody in a third person he could refer to. His mother is someone whom he would address to in the second person because of the presence. So I am present to the other. Of course, the other is present to me. So it is a kind of reciprocity that is involved in this intersubjective relationship. Again, it's a wonderful way of philosophizing, because I participate in you and you participate in me. And that's a bond. And it is a subject to subject bond. So it is only in the subject to subject bond that we may deeply care about one another. Otherwise, we can end up being very selfish monsters We can be very solipsist, kind of a narcissistic thinking that I alone exist, as though others don't exist. And I don't exist unless I am in existence, in relation, in an existential relation to others. I mean, that is what Gabriel Marcel would say. And it's, you remember, the only suffering is to be alone. Of course, alone not in the physical sense, but in the holistic sense, to be a loner, to be more precisely use the word. So this relation of intersubjectivity can be characterized in various ways, which other existential thinkers have also elaborated, in terms of commitment, in terms of fidelity, the mutual availability, in terms of love, and so on and so forth. Again, a wonderful concept that helps us. This is very important in today's world, where we are having a busy life, where sometimes it can be very, very painful to see two people going to a restaurant. Instead of conversing with each other, each one is watching on a mobile a cricket match. I mean, there is no presence, there is no availability. I'm not talking about the physical presence. Even otherwise, there is no that intersubjective bond which is not there. Even when people are physical, they can be just alone. There's certain indifference in our life. It's very strange, sometimes you do notice that. But very strange. The other themes that Gabriel Marcel discusses is also something to deeply connect with his theistic background. So he would elaborate on the themes like faith and transcendence and hope and salvation. I shall briefly sum up those ideas. You see, this whole idea of faith for him has to be seen in the question of intersubjective relationship and in the context of fidelity. Now, what happens in this intersubjective relationship, in this experience of fidelity? I transcend the relation of having and I enter into a relation of being. But in the human interrelationship, my exigency for commitment or fidelity is only partially fulfilled, according to Marcel. So therefore, there is an aspiration for us for transcending this even more, because when something is only partially fulfilled, you want to, that's part of our human experience. You are not satisfied with just a limited experience of something. You want even to have a greater experience. You want to transcend even more. You aspire towards the self-commitment, therefore towards the absolute. Of course, the absolute for him will be the God. But at the same time, you cannot just reach the absolute just like that. This can happen only through the finite thous, yous, in the sense of the second person, human person, who is referred to in the second person as part of you having an intersubjective relationship with him or her. So it is possible only through these finite thous. So it is only in and through these finite thous you become aware of your orientation towards the absolute thou. So you cannot say I am constantly orienting towards the absolute thou and I don't care about finite thous. It would be a lie. It simply is not possible, according to Marcel. The only way you can orient yourself towards the absolute thou, God, is only through these finite thous. And that is why very often people today tell us, if you want to serve God, serve people. You cannot serve God directly. You can serve God if you are a believer, but only by serving people. So I think that's a very nice way of putting it in simpler terms. And it is in the absolute thou that the universal human fraternity has attained its total actualization. Of course, that's a very theistic thinking. If we are not believers, then we may not accept that. But definitely, he gives a perspective. He gives a perspective, but the perspective remains within the human relationship. It is not running away from human relationship, seeking God. That cannot happen for Gabriel Marcel, at least. So my openness to being passes through the transcending of my egoism, which is important. Of course, I need to transcend my egoism in communion with others and through that to God. So for Gabriel Marcel, there is no point in trying to prove God objectively. I mean, you can never prove God objectively, nor can you disprove God objectively. I mean, that can only be a speculative way of trying to prove, disprove, and so on. I think it is of no worth for anyone. You believe or you don't believe, that's fine. That is each one's. You should always remember, most people's theism or atheism comes from other philosophical thinking. So people don't become atheists because they have something something to settle with God. They have some scores to settle with God. No, they become atheistic because the way in which God is used and abused by certain believers. Fair enough, I understand that. Whereas people can choose to be theists again because of a certain commitment that belief might give them to serve humanity. If it is not there, then I think it is that kind of atheism or theism is not to be taken seriously for me. An atheism or a theism that can be appreciated, either way, I appreciate anyone who is a theist or an atheist, provided that is related to a larger life scheme that you are in. It cannot be in terms of very narrow, exclusive kind of life scheme. So in that sense, I mean, there are wonderful atheists and there are wonderful theists. So most of the time, I think most atheists whom I would honor, whom I take very seriously, as well as most theists I take seriously, are the ones who have a larger scheme within which they find a place for God or no place for God. So it is not merely something, oh, I don't like God, I hate him, or I like God. It all depends on what kind of image that God is given to you. So if an image of God is given to you as somebody like a policeman constantly telling you do's and don'ts, I don't like a God of that type. No. Better I live without a God like that, Or if I'm given an image of a God who is a taskmaster, who kind of demands me things which are spontaneously, I think, as against certain human dignity, then I would consider I don't need such a God. So I think this is where the atheists come from, most of them. Okay, like remember, for example, Nietzsche, whom we discussed. I mean, he thought, the way the God he experienced in his life, the way God was taught to him, is somebody who kind of denies your possible growth, your creativity. He is crushing your freedom, and how can I accept such a God? Fair enough. From Nietzsche's point of view. So don't criticize somebody because somebody happens to be an atheist. You can criticize somebody for being an atheist or theist if their way of believing in God or not believing in God does not gel with their larger life perspective. So otherwise, it would be unfair on us to make any judgment on anybody. People are free. What makes their life better is what they will look for. So also you should understand, I sometimes get very annoyed with all this kind of religious discourses that are around us. We claim on the one hand God is powerful and so on, but somehow we think God needs us to defend him. Really? Does he? I don't care if somebody insults my God, that is his problem. An amount of human hatred and anger, and very often we create and fight with others and so on. Let somebody does a cartoon on my God, so be it. I mean, that is, he is free to express. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about if somebody attacks human dignity and human rights. That is much more a problem for me. So sometimes I'm afraid in this country the only problem that is talked is only the problem of religion, which is very unfortunate, sadly. Anyway, now let me come back to Gabriel Marcel. Therefore, God is not to be proved objectively, but you can only encounter him. But that encounter can happen only through the finite individual persons whom we encounter every day. So you don't need to run into a monastery, you don't need to go into your mountains, you don't need to go into a desert to experience God. You can experience God in the marketplace, in the cry of the child, in the agony of the immigrant worker. I think everywhere you can. If you are a believer, I would say you can. Try that. And there could be a lot of powerful mystical experience you may get on the streets rather than trying to run to a mountain or a desert. So the encountering of the God is a commitment to faith, basically, and then of course you encounter God in these finite thous. So faith is a gift or a grace which has to be won by freedom. Okay, you have to have faith freely. I mean, nobody can impose faith on you. It's not possible. Absolutely not possible. So Marcel also makes a distinction between a personal faith and a propositional faith. A propositional faith is, I believe that something exists. Now in this case, of course, God. I believe that God exists. Now, Marcel would say, so what? I mean, that is a propositional faith. Like it's saying, I believe that Delhi is the capital of India. So what? What does it mean to me? Where is my involvement there? It's merely an information, fine. It's a proposition that I make. It's a correct proposition, of course. At least in the case of Delhi is the capital of India. But in the case of God, okay, it can be debated. But that is only a propositional faith that doesn't serve anybody. It is useless. All the creed that we say, I believe that, I believe that, I believe that. So what? Is the question Gabriel Marcel would ask. Rather, the personal faith is, this here comes very close to Kierkegaard. I believe in God. Now, I believe in God would again mean not just God as a kind of absolute thou, but God within the scheme of all my intersubjective relationship I have with other persons. So you cannot say I believe in God if you really are not a being-centered person. That would be a betrayal of your faith. So he is connecting these things. So faith and freedom disclose the need for transcendence. Okay, and the transcendence first happens horizontally to other persons, then only it can happen vertically. You cannot, it transcends basically from my egoism. I must be able to move out of myself towards the other individuals, other persons whom I encounter in everyday life. Only then I can make a vertical transcendence. Without this horizontal transcendence, I cannot make a vertical transcendence. The last theme that he discusses, no, it's not the last theme he discussed. The last theme I would like to discuss with you about Gabriel Marcel is the idea of hope and salvation. Now, this idea of hope and salvation he brings in the context of the human contingency. The human contingency primarily that is experienced through the death. So for him, death is the meeting of life in time and life beyond time. So death is not for him end of time. So there is a temporal existence now, and then when I die, I enter into a non-temporal existence. So only from the time there is a break. So it's only in that physical reality, not at the metaphysical reality. So the bond persists. The bond persists so that my creative fidelity can continue and can actively perpetuate the presence. Again, go back. The experience he had in his childhood of experiencing the presence of his mother. And he considered that his mother is constantly, faithful to him in a very creative way, faithful to her son. That fidelity. This is why in common ways of saying we will say, you see, for example, you might have left us, but all the values that you have taught us will continue to live through us. You have heard about this. When we lose the dear one, we do say that. Somehow their presence is there in a different way, in a metaphysical way, not in the temporal physical way. They don't have a temporal existence, but they have a non-temporal existence. And that is why Mars would speak about the notion of hope. So when you lose somebody, you don't need to lose hope, because hope is basically a kind of waiting. You're waiting in the unknown, of course, but it's an active reaction against meaninglessness. So, unlike some other existentialists who would consider life as intrinsically absurd, for Marcel, life is meaningful, and hope is, reactivating this meaningfulness of life. So, death stands not as as a bondage, or it is basically stands as a gateway from one mode of existence to another mode of existence. Now remember, these are not scientific theories, but very meaningful, inspirational way of looking at human life. So people may believe that there is an afterlife, and you may not believe in afterlife. That's again, it cannot be proved or disproved. It's a matter of how you think your life is meaningful, or what is the meaning you give to the afterlife. If you think that you are someone who has made a deep impact in the lives of people whom you love, then you would continue to live in some way, at least, with the people whom you love. Or if there are a large number of people who love you, that's why great people are still alive. We keep talking about them. They fill our memories. So our discourses constantly make references to them. So hope is directed to an absolute end, unlike desire, which is directed only to a finite end. So I am desirous of have something, I want to have something, that is only a finite thing. But hope is an absolute end, because it stands for the meaningfulness of my life, not only mine, everybody, the human life in general. So just as faith, hope too can be distinguished between hoping in and hoping that. So I hope that is kind of very impersonal, whereas I hope in something is a very personal commitment. In that sense, when I hope in, that is what he would say is a salvation. Salvation means a liberation. Liberation understood after death. So salvation is not therefore a static state. Salvation for him is to be understood as a continual entering into that universal community. Universal community, basically humanity. So your salvation, that I am saved, means I'm just not in a particular state that I am in now, that I am constantly entering into this universal community. But of course he would say the universal community that has its ground in God from the theistic point of view. So Marcel's philosophy is thus based on the indispensability of faith, hope and love in concrete existence. So I think that is very, very, very inspirational. But again, remember, it is only a philosophy. It is not to be seen as scientific theories or scientific proofs or anything. So to conclude, let me conclude Marcel by summing up his ideas. Basically, Marcel's rich insights on human being, is worth considering, particularly at a time when we need to reappropriate some of those things. Marcel, is important because of the language that he speaks, the language of being, the language of mystery of human person, but also at the same time acknowledging the human fragility, but without giving up hope. There's a perspective of hope. So Marcel's philosophy of intersubjectivity and community complements other existentialist philosophers who focused exclusively on human individuality, which is good. But now Marcel is not focusing exclusively on human individuality, but also on the intersubjectivity and community. So these are some of the wonderful ideas of Marcel. So as I told you, if you ever want to do a final paper on Marcel, you could look at being and having, or the mystery of being. These are wonderful works of Marcel, or for any time when you want to read that. With that, I conclude my lecture for today. So I will stop the recording now. We'll take up a few questions for discussion after this. Thank you very much.